Hello everyone, my name is Kitetsu and welcome back to my channel. I've been away for a while and videos are well overdue, but here I am at last. For those of you who are wondering where I've been, and maybe you don't follow me on Twitter, I will talk about that soon. I've basically got plenty to be talking about already in this video as it is, so I will save the life history for another video. And actually I'm going to do a giveaway video at some point in this week, basically to say thanks to all of you amazing, incredible people, and to say thanks for getting to 5,000 subscribers. I'm going to give away another Start Collecting box. I know it isn't much, but it all comes out of my own money, and you know, this is the third giveaway I've done now, so either way I want to do something for all the support you give me, even if it's something only really small. And the last two giveaways I did were really successful. Loads of people entered and I got amazing emails saying thanks from the people who won and, you know, how fantastic it was. So just keep an eye out for that video. It will be open pretty much worldwide too. What I do is, for those of you who live outside of the UK, I basically just buy Games Workshop vouchers and get them emailed across to you. But anyway, back to the video. We have had the most insane news drops for the Idoneth that we've ever had over the last few days. It's all really exciting, and some of the stuff you might have read about already, but if you haven't checked out Warhammer Community or you don't read White Dwarf Magazine, then I'm here to fill you in on pretty much everything you need to know and basically just give you, as always, my reactions and thoughts on these topics. In my last video I talked about the initial announcement, and I started off a little bit disappointed because the army wasn't what I was expecting, but the more I see and the more I read, the more I absolutely love the Idoneth Deepkin. It sounds like they're going to have a fantastic backstory, which I was worried about at first. You know, I said all along that the success of the army to me hinges on if they can tie them all together with a great narrative, and it looks like they're going to do that in spades. What I thought I would do for this video is just run through the big news updates and, you know, like the release dates, the prices, the new information about the models and units, and just the release in general. And then I thought I would do a follow-up video that specifically focuses on the lore, because there's just too much information to cover in one video here. So first things first, we had an article on Warhammer Community yesterday telling us that the wait is almost over. We can pre-order the Idoneth next weekend. Well, this month's White Dwarf Magazine did a slight one-up on that, and it gave us a few more specifics. We now know we're going to be getting a dice pack, a battle tome, some new paint, and warscroll cards, and the pre-order date is the 14th of April, so in 4 days time as of recording this. Then they are going to be released on the 21st of April. So that means we can get our hands on some Deepkin in just over a week. It didn't say which specific figures we're going to be able to pre-order, so I guess we'll have to wait and see. But as for the prices, the battle tome is going to be £25, £15 for the warscroll cards, and £12.50 for the dice, which is pretty much exactly what we would expect. The dice are actually a bit unusual in this case because they are translucent, but I actually really like these custom dice sets Games Workshop releases. You know, I got the ones for the Daughters of Cain and they looked really great. So what other info did we get from the article? It tells us about the Namati Thralls. Hopefully I'm saying that right, but these guys are the foot soldiers of the Idoneth, the blind basic elves that surge onto the battlefield apparently like a flood before the storm. They may be blind, but they can still see with their supernatural abilities, and they have a low status within the army, which is signified by this collar that they wear. You know, the only reason I'm bringing this up is because, you know, a lot of people have criticised these particular figures, and I don't know, some people seem to have criticised them more than any other figures in the army, and it's weird because they're one of my absolute favourite. I like their aesthetic, I like that they have this really dark elf feel about them, and they almost feel a little bit like they are slaves. But, you know, I've touched on the lore a little bit there, and I said I was going to save that for another video, so enough of that for now, I guess. Next it tells us about Lotan or Lotan. I'm going with Lotan because it sounds better, but this guy is actually a named character, which I'm super excited about because Age of Sigmar seriously needs more characters, and I don't mean Gavriel Shawheart. I mean interesting and exciting characters with rich backgrounds. I was actually going to make a video on this topic at some point because Age of Sigmar definitely seems to have a slight issue here, but hopefully we'll get some good lore behind Lotan too, and he seems to be kind of shaping up that way at the moment. But basically he is a soul warden, and they have a very important responsibility within the Deepkin society, but they rarely leave their underwater cities. It's only really Lotan who regularly leaves the cities, and he joins the raids with his trusty octopus. Or Octar, should I say. Cool detail it points out here, the Octar actually has an inkwell and a scroll too, which I hadn't noticed the inkwell at all, so that's a really cool touch that adds a lot of character to the model. Next it talks about the one we all wanted to know more about, probably the coolest model in the army so far, the Eidolon of Mathlann. Look at these guys, they look so cool. And now we know that there's going to be two versions. We've got the melee orientated fighter and we've got the magic version. They don't tell us too much here, but fortunately the White Dwarf Magazine tells us far more. Basically, we've actually got his warscroll already. Well, for the melee version at least. It's a small image, but you can make out the text, just about. The Deepkin basically worship the god of the sea, Mathlann, and these guys are like a summoned avatar of that god. A little bit like an avatar of Cain, I guess. They're an idealised version of him that surges across the battlefield. This guy is super fast, flies, he's got a bravery of 10, and he's got some pretty nasty attacks. He's also got some very cool abilities that make him super dangerous when he charges, because he does extra damage and he heals D3 wounds. I must have said this 100 times on my channel, but I love figures that give a kind of buff aura to units around them, and this guy lets all Idoneth within 9 inches reroll wound rolls of 1, which is really great. He can also debuff enemy heroes by making them subtract 1 from hit rolls. So, you know, it looks pretty decent, but personally I can't wait to see what the magic version of him can do. It's a pretty stunning model though, and I can't wait to get my hands on one of these. Like, that cloak just looks so cool. Next we see some info about the Etheric Vortex Gloomtide Shipwreck, which is a bit of a mouthful, but it's the fantastic aquarium feature that was teased all those weeks ago. I'm almost disappointed I don't actually have my fish anymore, because this would have looked great in my fish tank. But being serious, it's another piece of scenery that buffs units around them, and I really like this approach from Games Workshop again. We had the wildwoods from the Sylvaneth, we had those feculent trees from the Maggotkin, so it's nice that they're continuing that trend. There's something I really like about personalising every battlefield you fight on with your own piece of faction specific scenery. It almost brings like an element of familiarity to a kind of uncertain table if you're playing somewhere you've never played before, but it's definitely very cool, and it's obviously going to play into the tactics of like your army very specifically. Then we get our brief mention of the Battle Tome. It actually looks, from another Games Workshop preview video, like it's going to be a pretty substantial tome. It looks like it's a really large book, and to me that's excellent news because it can only mean one thing: lots of lore. This is the first completely new elven faction for Age of Sigmar. Like, I know Daughters of Cain are new too, but this is like entirely new, completely built from scratch. So I guess we would have hoped to have a really great, fully fleshed out lore, and with the size of this book I'm very hopeful for that case. And you know, there's so much lore even in the White Dwarf magazine that things are definitely looking good for the Idoneth. So the Battle Tome is going to have this cool new mechanic based around tides, which is about like an ebb and flow of the battle as it progresses. So I think I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute because they mention it in another article. But yeah, the Battle Tome is also going to contain all of the history of their tragic backstory, and this is interesting. It says their discovery by Nagash, so I'm very intrigued to see what the connection is going to be there. Then we get a look at the 2 new paints, always exciting, and and the last few new paints we've had from Games Workshop have actually been really excellent. You know, love or hate the Hammers of Sigmar, the shades of gold we got were really good, so hopefully these paints will sort of live up to that expectation too. Then lastly, we get a look at the dice and the promise of Battle Tome previews coming soon, so obviously I'll do my best to cover all of that information. So here's the second article. This one was called Who Are the Idoneth Deepkin? And it tells us they're going to be in Grand Alliance order, which, let's face it, we all knew that was going to be the case, even if they perhaps have an even more rocky relationship with other factions than the Daughters of Cain do. This article gives us a look at some super cool rules. We get to see that they're very resistant to missile attacks, which is really great. I can't remember the precise rule in 40k because I don't really play that very much, but I think there's one that's something like you can't target a hero unless it's the closest unit, and there's something very similar going on here. You can't shoot at a unit unless it is the closest visible unit to the enemy that's firing. And here we go, the tide rules. So let's have a look. It looks like it's going to be something very similar to what we had with the Daughters of Cain. Every battle round we get something new and awesome. But look at this, it says battle round 1 they are treated as if in cover. That's absolutely crazy. So basically turn 1 you get +1 to saves. It does look like these aren't cumulative like the Daughters of Cain, so you just get a cool new bonus every turn, and to be honest I quite like that because it's this cool new twist for the army. Battle round 2 they can still shoot or charge after having run, that's pretty cool. Round 3, High Tide, they can... Oh, that sounds like it could be really nasty. The Deepkin units with Tides of Death get to attack first in the combat phase. That's extremely cool and sounds potentially devastating. Then we get the Ebb Tide coming next, which lets you retreat and still shoot or charge. I see what's going on here. It's like a wave moving forwards and then retreating backwards. Then we get lastly the cycle repeating and we go back to square one. Okay, so the army really does have like an ebb and flow to it. You start defensively, then you do the insane attack potential stuff, then you retreat and you're back to being defensive. It's a really cool idea and I love it. You know, it's always really cool when they try and really link the rules to the lore of the faction, so that's really cool. Let's just finish off by looking at some of the other cool little facts we got from the White Dwarf magazine. The eels are going to be called Fangmora eels. The sharks are going to be called Alopex. They're both going to be ridden by the Achillean, or maybe Achillean beast riders, I don't know how to say that. Lastly, this guy is called an Achillean king or queen. I was actually quite unsure about this model at first because he looked so piratey, but now I'm over the moon with the fact that there is an alternate version, which in my eyes looks infinitely cooler. But yeah, these guys are basically the military leaders of the Idoneth. Now we know that this guy here, which we saw in the preview, is called a Soul Render. And they sound really cool. We don't know how they're going to play out, but they basically lure people into a potentially fatal sleep with the little lantern dangling over its head. I'll talk about them a bit more in the lore video as with all of these characters here, but this guy is a soul scryer who is kind of like a priest and a navigator. Then this lady here, who I said I really liked in the last video, she is called a Tidecaster. And she, as you might guess, is all about magic. By the looks of things, it's basically her spells that allow the Idoneth to travel across both land and sea. So from a lore perspective, she seems like an essential model to own, which is really great because I think the model looks really cool. Then it tells us the big turtles are called Leviatons, and apparently they're quite rare amongst the army, but I will talk about them a little bit more in another video too. To be honest, the White Dwarf magazine is absolutely just crammed full of information. It was probably one of the best issues I've read in a while, and I imagine this video could end up being a little bit longer than usual because there's just so much to talk about here. I have no idea how long I've been talking for, but there's just too much to talk about in one video, so I will pick apart the article even more, and I will come back with a video focused on the cool stuff, which is the lore and the storylines, or at least to me. But anyway, guys and girls, this is more than enough information from one video, I think. I'm going to leave this one here. Don't forget to hit that like button. It really brightens up my day when I get support from all of you. If you are new to the channel, hit the sub button. You can support me on Patreon. The link is in the description. And yeah, just don't forget to look out for that giveaway soon and my Idoneth kind of lore introduction, I guess. But yep, I will see you guys really soon.